just want to say first and foremost, thank you for willing to do this. I know you're crazy busy, and but glad you're here in San Antonio. And I just want to hear you talk about how you got started and talk about your story and what made you fall in love with music.
You know, I had a really different background than a lot of the people that I've met, especially in the activity that we're in and teaching at a college in Texas where kids start at 6th grade and it's this machine that they churn through for 7 years and then go on, many of them, to college. Where I'm from Washington State, and you can start fine arts in 5th grade, and you just put down like what instrument you want to play, and you kind of do a little, can you like walk and chew gum at the same time? And I was a percussionist, which was terrifying because I was the only girl that put it, and I thought that's a weird thing, and I hope this will work. And we had one director, and she just taught all the instruments. We had one class, and that very nice lady, now I can't imagine what she went through with all of us beginning at exactly the same time on all of our instruments, all in one room. But that was 5th grade, and I continued then into 6th grade. And then through middle school, it was, again, you were never isolated as a section. Everybody was just all in one room, and you had the one director. And but it was fun, and all my friends, everybody was doing band, and so I stuck with it. And then in high school, I grew up playing sports, and that was like my family's background was more athletics, and so I was playing varsity soccer, varsity softball, and I was really into that. And at that time, that we had a new band director in my freshman year of high school. And he was really more into the jazz side of the program, and freshmen were not really involved in any of that. And so it just wasn't, it wasn't really that fun. I don't know. All the fun that I had like in middle school, just doing it with your friends, like it was just different. And so I had actually stopped because it was one of those like, I'm doing all this stuff with sports. Maybe I'll go do art. Maybe I'll do these other things. And so yeah, I was totally out of the band program. And then in between my freshman and sophomore years, a band director was hired. That was just out of his master's degree, like young and energetic. I think he probably had to be to take on a program like that. And he called every single person that could even be in the group. And so we got the phone call. I'll never forget. In the summer, we got the phone call, and it was, I am the new band director. I just bought a whole new like Yamaha drum line, and I'm thinking like, I don't even know what you're talking about, but okay. And can you just come? Yeah, sounds cool. Can you? We had like the old sparkly thing. Like there was no investment whatsoever in the percussion program prior to that, and. But he's like, yeah, I bought this whole new Yamaha line. You got to come check it. Just come by the band room. Just check it out. I'll meet you. It'll be great. And he just sold it. And it's so funny to think like, what would if I would have just like, if he wouldn't have put in that effort, just how different my life would be now. What was also cool is that was my sophomore year. Now I was in this program, and he was a trumpet player, so he was non-percussionist. And again, the only director in the school. It was a 3A school, which is as big as we got in Washington State at that time. And instead of having the percussionist sit in the band class and do what percussionists do during band, he said, all right, after the Christmas holiday, all you percussionists are going to be in 4th period percussion class. I'm just going to pull everybody. Nice. And that's 9th through 12th grade, 4th period. I'm like, okay, well, I have algebra, I have this class, I have that class, and he was like, don't worry, I'll talk to all the teachers, I'll make this work. And so all of a sudden, we're going every day. We're in a class in the band room with just percussionists, and he'd print something out or find something on hand drumming, and we'd all play like hand drums for 2 weeks, and then we would do we were all working on drum set for a while, and then it was
This is a trumpet player doing
and this is a trumpet player, and then what we would do is 2 weeks before the concert, he had 2 concert bands, I think. He would just assign the parts, rehearse it with us in percussion class, and we'd go to a week of rehearsals, and we'd play the concert. But we'd also then on the concert play percussion ensemble music and play, we could work on the marching band show if we needed to. We had that extra time that he just had the percussionist, and we didn't have to worry about, keeping everybody happy during the band class. So
do you remember the moment where, because you got the call, then you show up the day.
Yeah.
And so do you remember, was it that first day that you were like, I like this, I'm going to come back?
Yeah, I think I came down with a friend. I couldn't drive yet, so you're at the mercy of when mom can take you. which probably amounted to her just dropping me off for an infinite amount of time. And I remember being there with a friend and seeing like there were different bass drums, like bass drums of different sizes, and like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. You know, this was like the 1900s, as I like to say, so it was a while ago.
Same.
But at the same time, it's like, you know, just seeing things like, you know, the Yamaha like Sforzando snare drum. Like I never, you know, again, we had these like sparkly things that I don't even know what they were, and but just seeing things for the first time. And at that time, like I didn't even know you could like go to college and study music. It never occurred to me to even question like how we even had these teachers that only focused on band. Like I really had no idea, and it was just through my involvement with him really as a teacher, again, who's really into the jazz program. He was the first person to show me how to hold Burton grip. And so he was like, you know, you're going to play vibes in the jazz band. I could read music really well because I took a year of piano when I was very young, and I would, you know, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have Netflix. I had no video game system in my house. And so, you know, we had a piano though. And my mom had a lot of music because she had played as a kid. And so a lot of times when dinner's being made or whatever, again, it's Seattle, you're not always running around outside because it's, you know, probably raining. Yeah. And so I would just kind of nerd out and like just pick up music and just read it. And I didn't realize at the time that I was just getting really, really good at doing that, because I would just be reading these piano pieces and I would just get better and better. And
it wasn't work. It wasn't practicing.
No, I had no idea that I was practicing. Yeah, it's like, but at the time, it's like, wow, so I just had that I guess that curiosity or that desire to be able to do it. And then, you know, learned how to play Burton grip, played vibes in the jazz band, learned what a vibraphone was, really, because I had never seen anything like that. And then the last couple of years of high school, there was a local group called the Imperials. It was like a music and youth community band organization. They started rehearsing at my school. I took lessons my senior year, and that was the percussion teacher for this community group. And they would store their equipment at my high school, which consisted of, I saw my first, like, I don't know if you remember these, the black Musser synthetic keyboards where it's like these fiberglass bars that are black and the gold resonators. And that was the first marimba I ever saw in my life. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And, you know, like most people that have played piano that then go to like playing 4-mallet marimba, it's like, oh, I only have 4 notes to worry about. Like it seems very, very, very simple.
So you're cheating basically instead of going, you go from 10 to 4.
Yeah, I was like, this is nothing. Yeah, but I played Burton grip all the way through, and it was kind of funny because I went and auditioned at a school in Washington, had a fantastic teacher there. But yeah, I just had not been exposed still to anything. And then that first year when I was a freshman, again, it's a small school with no 5-octave marimbas. Like every high school in Texas probably has a 5-octave marimba, or it seems like it sometimes.
They should. Right?
And at this point, it's like an arms race, right? But at that time, even my college didn't have it. It was a smaller school, like 150 probably total in the department. But it was really neat because like your top players in the orchestra, like, you know, the trumpet player in the orchestra is also the lead trumpet player in the jazz band and is also in the wind ensemble. And, you know, that person is a singer in the jazz group, but she also plays like clarinet in the wind ensemble. And it was just so neat to be surrounded like by so many well-rounded musicians and the exposure to different types of things. But I was in there studying performance, and it was really, really fascinating because, again, it was so new. And I wasn't coming from like somebody who was like totally immersed from like fifth and sixth grade. It was like everything was still new and exciting. And then my freshman year, we submitted the PAS call for tapes that they have, and we won. So we were going to go so my sophomore year, that would have been fall of '95, and it was in Phoenix, and that was my first PASIC. And it was unbelievable. Like, I think everybody remembers the first time you like walk into the exhibit hall and just like,
for sure,
wow. Like, it was pretty intense. And I remember seeing like, there's Gordon Stout that just walked by, and oh my gosh, that's Lee Howard Stevens. Like, I'm gonna go and like just ask him a question about Malatech just so I can hear him talk for a second, because these are people like you only read about, or you buy, you know, in that time you have to like, oh, I want to hear this marimba solo, I have to buy it from Steve Weiss Music. I got to buy the CD, and then I can hear it, right? And Michael Burrett, like all these people that like I've only just seen their names, you know?
Yeah, there was no YouTube where you could like, you know, like you said, you had to like go and just old school.
Yeah,
You just had to find it.
I kind of had a deal with my parents were helping me because it's expensive to be a percussionist, and I was again so new. I had like my one set of mallets and my pair of concert sticks, and that was about it when I started. But we kind of made a deal that every time I ordered anything, I would add like a CD, because I don't know if you remember those catalogs, but like Steve, it would be a catalog, and you'd call and like have to have it like your order totally ready to go.
Yeah, I remember the Lone Star ones. That's what I remember.
The little booklets.
The
Yeah. Yeah.
They would change colors depending on season and all.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yes, and but yeah, I would order a CD every time I ordered like a set of mallets. I'd also like throw a CD in there, like that's how I heard like October Night for the first time, and the Mexican dances, and this Keiko Abe CD, and just really tried to get that exposure that way.
Yeah.
And because a lot of it was really limited. You're limited to just whatever everybody else around you is playing. And but going to PASIC was that was a game changer, I think, for me. It kind of really piqued my curiosity as far as like what else is out there.
Yeah, I could see that.
My world, even though my worldview had grown, it was still really, really small in the big picture, and I didn't realize it at the time.
I think something that's relatable is when a lot of people go to their first camp, like a drum corps camp.
Mm-hmm.
If they've never done it, when they go to the first one, it's like all of a sudden it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like there are people that are really that good, or so I think
like that person's my age.
Right.
And
they do different things, but I think it's along the same lines of what kind of event it is to a person.
Yeah.
And so I had heard that, or I saw in the video that you said your dad changed jobs, and that's how you ended up here in Texas?
Sort of, yeah. He worked for the Burlington Northern Railroad, and that's how we lived anywhere. It was always a job-related move. So even being in Seattle was a result of the company relocating there. And so in '95, like I was in college, but my parents had moved that summer to Texas, Fort Worth. That's where the headquarters are still to this day. And so over Christmas, again, already attended PASIC. It was amazing. My parents actually had come to PASIC, and it was a similar sort of thing. Like, oh my gosh, we had no idea there were that many people that even like doing what you do. Like other people do this. Like, oh,
it's not just a hobby, right?
Yeah, like wow, you can really do this. And so, come Christmas time, I was visiting my family for Christmas, and I remember like my birthday is right before Christmas, and my dad and I, for as long as I could remember, we called them bonding days. But basically, we would just, again, I was the youngest, and I was the only girl in like 3 generations. So from the time that I was probably a toddler, we would always have one day where we'd just go and spend the whole day together. It was really awesome. Yeah. And but so we had a plan that I had heard that University of North Texas was like okay in the music thing. It was just a different, like everybody knew about their jazz program where I went to school.
And this was '95?
This would have been in winter '95.
Okay.
And so I just called and like set up a tour like of the College of Music, and my dad and I went up there. And it's funny because we're on this tour, and like it's so different even now, but at that time, like I remember walking into one of the rehearsal rooms, and the only place I had seen that many marimbas in one place was at PASIC in the exhibit hall, and I'm like, wait, this is just like where percussion ensemble meets, and like what, and like how many percussionists are here, and whoa. And I think the drive to like be closer to my family and all that was part of my reason to like kind of look there. But also just kind of that need to, I think, get into a bigger place. Again, I had been in such a I loved the school. I think it was so valuable those first few years that I had, but I really needed to like be surrounded by, I just wanted to be just totally inspired.
You were looking for it.
I needed it, yeah. And it's funny, to this day, the woman who gave us a tour, she still works in the College of Music, and I just saw her last week. Like now, as an adjunct teaching there, like I'll see her, and it's so funny because I think, wow, I was like a 19-year-old kid, and like, we give each other a big hug, and she's like, "How are you?" It's just funny, like how it's come like full circle now. But so I auditioned there, and it's funny because like Shi Wu. You may have heard of her. She was getting her master's degree when I came out, and that's who I studied with, and it was life-changing. Absolutely. I credit like my relationship with her as being just so hugely monumental in how I approach playing and how I approach teaching. I mean, I learned so much from her in so many ways that that was such a huge a huge moment, a huge thing. Like we talk about, I get the phone call from the band director.
Yeah.
Like I would say getting to work with her for that year was so important to me when I look back on it now,
Yeah.
especially as a teacher now. And I think like I remember like learning this in this like exact room that I'm standing in right now, you know, from her.
But
There's probably a lot more colorful language coming from her than I use with my students, but you know.
Okay, so how was that though? I mean, before you even you're going to your first lesson with Shi'iwu,
Yeah.
Was it like, oh man,
well, what
like
I
this
did,
is
well, I will say what I did is when I auditioned, because I went through the audition process and all that, I came up on the Friday before auditions. And I mean, that was simply all that I did. And I hung out with her like the whole day, just introduced myself. And I went, you know, Will Kennedy is giving a clinic, and there's like, the recital hall's totally full. And I'm like, this is just your percussion studio? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And I meet Dr. Stroma, and, you know, I'm just like, I'm coming from a place where it's like, you know, 15 below zero, because it's like February, yeah. And like, it's like 70 degrees in Denton, right? You know, and it was just like, it was really cool. And I had a great experience. And again, just hanging with Shi'i for the day. She was really cool. And yeah, then coming in the fall, it was a no-brainer. But yeah, it was terrifying. I think Ed Soph scared me more. I studied drum set with him.
I've heard that many times
and
from different people.
I think I probably practiced more drum set than anything else, like at the time that I was studying with him. But because, you know, it's scary.
Sure.
But I loved it because I think I could tell he was holding me. It wasn't like I was getting any like leeway just because that wasn't my first instrument or anything. In fact, I feel like I learned more about playing marimba and just playing music by working with him. And I think that's like the biggest lesson like people can take is like, I know it's a trend to maybe specialize in one thing or another, but I know like at UNT, like the curriculum, like you have to do everything. And if you can get through everything, then, I mean, that's a serious accomplishment. But I think it scares a lot of people away. Like, oh, well, I'm going to really just specialize in this one thing. Like, I know, like, as a teacher, like, playing more snare drum, because I'm teaching all the kids the all-region thing, and there's, like, you know, 3 4-note or 4-stroke roughs in a row in this Vic Firth etude, and I got to be able to do this. Like drumming, like, all that stuff really helps everything else. Yeah. You know, and I think we tend to really try to separate things just so we can specialize. But I don't think that's good.
Dave always makes this it's a joke, but it's true. He goes, it's not getting in, it's getting out. That's the
oh my
deal
gosh,
at North Texas.
Absolutely.
You know, because the kids at school, like, oh, they really want to go there. They really want to get in. It's like, well,
yeah, getting accepted is almost the easiest part of the whole process.
That's what he says.
That's
He's
funny,
like, getting out. That's where it gets hard.
It is, and it's funny. I taught. I just started teaching in the fall. Mark Ford approached me about you know, he said, you know, we've recruited a ton. We have a lot of kids, and we're really trying to have every freshman work with a professor. And so he's like, we really need you. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome.
So are you teaching incoming freshmen?
I teach, yes. I had 12 this last, I teach 20 students every semester. In the fall, I had 12 freshmen. I think I have maybe a few more this semester. But I teach, you know, I have a grad student as well. But what was really neat, and I don't know if it's the mom in me and how different I am now as just a person, but it was really neat to just get to see them, because they're going through so much their first semester. Like, they're still like, did you remember to like eat today? Like, did you get to the dining? Like, who's doing your laundry? Like some of these kids,
part.
It's like they're learning how to college. And on top of also trying to get through the barrier system. And I think that first semester is where it's kind of like the make it or break it point for a lot of kids. And a lot of that is, I think, they're so heavily swayed by what happens outside of what we're even doing in lessons. So I talk to them a lot, like, how's theory going? Yeah. How's oral skills? And, you know, if they have questions about that, I always just try to answer that. And the most important thing, I think, is just to show them how it's all connected, like what you're learning in theory. This is how it applies to what we're doing in the, you know, with this Goldenberg, you know, this assignment that we're doing here, or these, you know, your jury piece, let's talk about how that's related to what you're working on outside of this, so that they don't see everything as like they have to commit all these hours of the day. They can kind of, you know, combine.
You know, I know you've taught a bunch of students. Is looking at all of those, I guess, as a whole, as a macro, is there maybe something that you feel that young students should maybe start focusing on a little bit more before they get to the college level, if they plan on studying music?
You know what's really interesting is I think because we're so exposed at such a young age now, again with YouTube
Yeah.
and the internet, and we see, it's amazing to see what kids are doing. Again, I learned how to hold 4 mallets like late in high school. I didn't
Same.
take lessons till I didn't learn Stevens till I was in college.
Yep.
And I was like, do I really need to learn this? I was like I said just the worst things. I look back, I'm like, how did my teacher not kick me out of my lesson? But like, do I really need to do this? I think they almost like, there's no progression. Like we learn like our first marimba solo, and then it's like, okay, now I'm going to learn velocities. And I'm a freshman in high school, but man, I can read music and I can cram it all in. Or I'm going to, and I think they try to run before they can walk in a lot of ways. And I think we lack, we say that, I think everybody has their phone and it's like the time of instant gratification.
Right.
And I think we have to be careful not to let that bleed over into this, because I think there is definitely, you have to have a certain amount of patience when you're learning. And that's like the hardest part, I think.
It's we tell the kids, like, you got to embrace the suck.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like it's
like it's going to be bad at some point, yeah.
And that's part of it.
Right.
That's part of the process.
I try to tell them, even my kids when they were in elementary school, my older two, they had a great teacher who would say, they called it the H word, and they weren't allowed to say the H word. Something's not hard. They could say it challenges us right now, or it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And I really like that, because there's that implication that this is the only, like, we're going to be able to do this. It's just challenging us right now. It's not that it's black or white, like it's hard or easy. And so I try to do that with my students too. And I try to get them to see that a concept is new. Like, don't see it as this is too hard or I can't do it. Just say it's new, it's brand new. You've done it for 10 seconds.
Yeah, 'cause hard is relative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I try to get them also to really acknowledge the victories, no matter how small they are. Like, I try to constantly remind them, like 3 weeks ago, like when you're telling me you're ready to like go home because you can't, like you feel so behind and you can't do this, like, and now we're, able to read through these etudes without stopping 15 times, like it's hard to really, because what we do is not like a tangible thing that you can hold in your hands. Like, I built this bookcase, or I, cooked this meal, or I built, I have something that I can hold in my hands that I did. It's really hard to see those improvements and that progress. And that's the thing. I think we have to really learn how to, maybe if it's hard for the students because they're just younger, but I think as teachers especially, we need to really make sure we acknowledge when there is improvement, because it's really easy to fall into the trap of, I think, just constantly pointing out the mistakes.
It's never good enough.
And then the kids will always just expect that there's a mistake, or there's always something, and there always are improvements, but at the same time, everybody wants to feel like they're, they sound
moving
well
forward,
and moving
like,
forward, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, it's really interesting, what I see with a lot of my students now too is, I try to get the ones, because I'll have some, I teach also at Texas A&M University Commerce, an adjunct out there, and I see kids from a lot of schools, and it's so funny because they'll be, I come from you probably never heard of this town, it's a, really close to the border, we only had one director, and they're so quick to like just really downplay their whole experience. And I'm like, when you are in a situation where you have a tech for every single section, and you're used to just stopping that rep, and you wait for the feedback from your teacher to tell you everything that was wrong, like you sometimes you lose the ability to hear. And so I was like, the fact that you were in this program where you aren't necessarily getting that feedback, that puts it on you and the responsibility on you as a player and in your section to learn how to listen. Yeah. And be able to solve problems and fix things yourself. And that, in a lot of ways, is far more relevant to the rest of their lives as musicians than if they're in a program like a powerhouse that has, a tech for the right hands and a tech for the left hands. And
somebody always telling you what the issue is, but you don't hear it, or you don't realize it.
You don't have to hear it.
Right.
You don't have to ever learn how to hear it, because you're told constantly everything about what you just did. And so I try to really get them to see that, like, regardless of where you came from, there's good and bad in everything. Like, again, I think about where I came from, and it's like, it's crazy how, never would I have imagined that I'm doing what I'm doing now. I didn't march. I didn't know what drum corps was. I would catch it on the Thanksgiving PBS broadcast. Yeah. It took me forever to realize that they showed it in the order that they finished. I remember in '93, totally watching this, true story, thinking the Star of Indiana show was so cool. And then I watched the cadets after, and I waited to see who was going to win, and I could not believe that Star did not win. I was like, oh man. And then it occurred to me years later, I'm like, oh, they were just showing it in the order that it finished. but there's some sort of suspense there. But yeah, I mean, I would see it on TV occasionally, but yeah, I knew the names of some of the groups. But you know, in Washington, like we start school well into September, but we go well into June as well. So you're not like, if you're doing it, that means you're not like in school.
Yeah.
And which I think was the way that probably all used to be. You'd move out in the winter and not be a student. So it never was a thing until I moved to Denton and got around. That was the first time I met anybody that had ever actually done it.
Sure.
I remember thinking, oh, you were in like the Madison Scouts? I've heard of them. Like, that's neat, you know, like how cool, you know, but I knew nothing about it. And I think that's why, I don't know, I feel like we've been such a good fit, Paul and I think that's why he hired me initially when we went to Crown, when he got the caption head job there. Because I had a lot of experience in competition. Like I'd grown up playing sports and like I really understood that. And I really appreciated how that's applied to music in a lot of ways, just because it's really relatable. But like, you know, I was like a marimba player. Like I was really into that. And so being involved and in that sort of scene was really interesting to me. Because it was like a mix, you know? So,
okay, so you got the 98 gig with Paul.
Mm-hmm.
When did you go ahead and start arranging
that
stuff?
that was a while later. I think Paul sort of tricked me into learning how to use Finale. I have just like a natural curiosity on like learning things.
He tricked you.
And I think that I got a little bit like, hey, did you know this program? It's really neat. And like each one of these numbers like refers to like a rhythm, like 4 is an eighth note, 5 is a quarter. I'm like, oh wow, cool. And then so I joke with them about that a little bit, like thanks. It wasn't. I think it was for the '99 show that we did. I didn't write it all in '98. In '99, I wrote a couple of movements for the Jekyll and Hyde show. It's totally on the DL. Like I was terrified because I'm thinking, I've never done this before, you know. And yeah, Paul he had done everything, and he still, again to this day, could probably do everything. But we'd like to see each other every now and then, so it works out better that we collaborate, and then we can, you know, you can have a social life a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, in 2000 I wrote, it was just like a little bit more and more. But yeah, starting, 99 was the first time I remember him asking me, like, can you just write this part of the show? And I was like, yes, but I'll only do it, this was like February, you know, February camp. Yes, but only if you promise that you're going to change it later. And he's like, oh, you know, he's like, whatever, yeah, okay. And it was fine. And he did not ever change it. But I remember being so nervous and so scared. But I did a lot of writing over the years, just kind of helping with that. Paul was writing a lot of band shows, and it became, you know, again, still scary, but at the same time, it was a lot of fun to get to do that and cut my teeth that way.
So when you arrange, can you talk about your process? Like, do you start with melody? Do you get behind a keyboard first? Like,
you know, it really varies on the project. It varies on the deadline. Kind of a pressure player, so I need that that deadline. I need that hard deadline, and it doesn't always feel very healthy, but at the same time, it's like the suffering is worth it. I think, you know, there's got to be a little pain in the process.
There's that I think it's like a Nike T-shirt. It says like pressure creates diamonds.
Oh, I like that. I'm going to use that now. Yeah, I definitely am a procrastinator. I can think of like one time in like my probably 7 years of school between the universities and my master's degree and all that. I think one time I like wrote a paper like on it was done on a Saturday instead of like the late night Monday morning.
11:59
one time,
Sunday.
literally one time as a book report in like my sophomore year of college. Yeah, it's like the outlier of my whole process ever in my life. But yeah, it really depends. I can remember certain things where it's just, I mean, like anything that's creative, I think, you know, it's very easy to sit and stare at the screen for 4 hours and get nothing done. And then it's very easy to just all of a sudden, like, I can think of a spot in the 2007 show On Air. That's what it's called, right? At Phantom Regiment. And there's a transition that was out of 1,000 Airplanes on the Roof that went into the Flower Duet. And we recapped some of the Vespertine formations, which is a percussion marimba quartet that we had used by Christopher Dean. And I think I cranked that in like 30 minutes. just because first of all, our oldest was down for a nap, and I knew he was waking up in like 30 minutes or so.
The clock was ticking.
The clock was ticking, but also it was like I just knew what it needed to be, and it's probably one of my favorite things that I've done, and it's kind of weird that but other times I can remember just like being miserable, just trying to come up with something.
So when you guys decide on source material, how do you listen to it a lot, like before you even get into the writing process, or do you look at the score, or do you do any of that?
Yeah, it really depends. I think I make this joke, and Paul, I think he doesn't like me making this joke, but I usually think most of our best stuff has been like something that I thought is like the worst idea possible. Like 2013, we're doing Les Mis, and he's like, hey, we're going to do Castle in a Cloud is going to be the pit feature. I'm like, that is the worst idea
It was awesome.
I have ever heard. But I'm like, this is and he doesn't say it. He used to like try to engage and like argue with me. And now he just lets me just stew. And he knows like in a couple weeks, it'll all be fine. And it was all fine. And again, that was one of those that once I actually was when I was ready to write it, it was effortless. And that's, I think, kind of more of my process. It's like it has to do with timing. And I think that's also why, like, I have friends that write so many shows. Like, that's all they do is they write. And for me, I don't know that I could ever do that. I think that would just be too hard. I don't think I could give my best to everything. So now, like, I write for two drum corps with Troopers in Santa Clara. And then Wiley High School, I have an old student that teaches there. And so I help him out.
Sure.
And I know they're usually pretty late in the summer when they need their stuff. So it works out timeline-wise.
Yeah.
But yeah, the next year we're doing, all of a sudden somebody decided we're doing Scheherazade. I'm not on the design calls. I don't get on those conference calls. Paul is the voice of reason for the percussion section. It's like, there's total trust there. And I think that just kind of, I'm on a need to know basis for a lot of this stuff. And, but yeah, I remember when it was decided we're doing Scheherazade. I'm like, why in the world are we doing Scheherazade? Like, I was that, the squeaky wheel. But again, I think I'm really proud of how that all turned out. And, but that's kind of, we could just go down the list of every show and I could tell you all the things that I hated about each year at first.
Sure.
My body is a cage. I'm like, there's 2 chords in this intro. There's 2 chords. You want 45 seconds at it.
What
2
am I
chords.
supposed to do
seriously,
with 2 chords?
This is seriously, like, this is like we are reliving like a conversation that I'm sure we had at our house. And yeah, there's 2 chords. Why are we doing, like, the original has all this other stuff. No, we're using the Peter Gabriel version. There's 2 chords, Paul. Show me. 45 seconds. Go. We have 4, and it's so funny because I think, like, yeah, it's like it ends up, and I think he knows, as he's getting hit with the snowballs as I'm yelling at him, it's like, he knows it'll be fine. I think in some ways, the more resistant I am, I think that's usually a sign that it's going to be maybe some of the best stuff, because I'll be so mad, like when it actually hits me, it'll be great,
You mentioned how you only write for 3 groups, and I think it's a very good thing, because there are people that just pump out crazy amounts of shows. And at what point I wondered, like, does it become a job instead of just like,
I agree.
Instead of, okay, this is a creative canvas. I get to be creative and have fun and enjoy space, versus, all right, I'm done with this one. What's next? And it's just.
Yeah, where your whole year is scheduled out based on like what season we're in. And I totally agree. I think it would be like factory work for me. Okay, insert another 8-bar phrase here. Insert another, 4-measure stock pit thing. Or, and I don't think anybody would get my best stuff. And that would be, I wouldn't enjoy it anymore. And I think about all the other things in my life. I'm a mom of 3 kids. I'm the manager of one of the soccer teams. We just have a lot to do. And to have that balance, with Paul at UNT, and now I used to not be nearly as busy as I am now, but now teaching at the 2 places, I think that's kind of, that balance was so necessary. I remember when we finally got to that point where we could like say no, or feel like we could say no to things, and just wow, it's so nice to like not have Paul gone every weekend at, doing something here or there, and, just to have him there. And, it's a lot of fun to just be like, have that balance with just being a family. And
like, you guys have also worked so hard to get to that point. Like,
absolutely.
There was a time where you weren't doing that.
No, not at all. In fact, I still toured like the entire 2006 summer. Like, I was pregnant with our first kid, and I was on tour, which is horrifying when I think about it now. But it was like, I didn't know how not to do all this stuff because that's just what we did. Like even that summer, I think Paul missed like 9 days of rehearsal the entire summer. Yeah, that's how it all just used to be. And now I think he's recognized also, like over time, just you have to have that balance. I know, like you look at the staff lists on a lot of drum corps and you see like 3 techs for every section. It's like, you know, you can't expect somebody to give up their entire summer to just do this. I don't think that's fair. And I also don't think that students would get the best teacher that way, because I know how I feel. I know how, I mean, just even talking to Paul now, like I know how he is the longer he's on the road, and you know, you need that break to come in fresh and ready to go. And ultimately that's who the students are, the ones that deserve our best. And so,
to be fair though, I think your child hearing '06 beats every single day was pretty awesome. I mean, that group was so good.
that group was very good. It's funny. I'd get so mad though. Paul would say if it was too hot. I remember us being in Louisiana and he like sent me inside. I'm like so mad.
I get it though.
It's too hot.
You know,
I'm like, come on.
When my wife was pregnant, we were at Disney World, and I was like, you cannot get on the Avatar ride. It pushes down in your belly. And I'm like, no.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I think she was less than 3 months though. She's like, it's not a big deal. I'm like, no, it's
like
not happening.
Not to you maybe, but yeah, I know. That's funny.
One of the things that I think, as just an observer, that I've always felt that I think you and Paul together in your groups, and I think it has a lot to do with your background, is with drum corps, you keep education at the foundation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about why that's so important to you guys?
You know, I think you learn, and we say this to our students, like especially, we tend to, when a student is coming and they're complaining, let's say about this, oh, I have this teacher and he's terrible and he only says that, it's you try to give them that, you know, that you learn from every situation. I can think of some of like really great ensembles I've been part of, like not even just percussion. I can think of some where it hasn't been the best experience, but I feel like, you know, you learn from absolutely everything, but only if you're open to learning from that. You know, it's anybody can complain or anybody can do that. And I think, you know, I just think of some of it, like just some of the times where you can really focus on the negative, or you can try to take it in a different direction and see what you can actually get out of this. Yeah. And I think what I loved about drum corps when I taught, like that first year in 1998, like all of a sudden I had a captive audience, like for the entire summer. And they are looking at me to just like, wow, I've never had this kind of like
you had basically
situation.
A ball of clay and you could
I did,
mold
and
it.
it was and it was really fun. And because you know the drum corps show is 12 minutes long or whatever it is. And it's like, so that became kind of our goal. I know at least in the front ensemble for sure. And like I say this still to the staff of the front ensemble, like if they come home only knowing that show, then everybody's fired. Like we have not done our jobs. Yeah. And I think we've always kind of taken that approach as the instructors. The pressure is on us. You know, we need to get them to play well. Like it's not like, you know, you see a lot of, I think it's you know, it's easy to just kind of blame the kids if something doesn't go well. And I think we've always just taken it upon us, like they're not trying to make a mistake. Like, let's see if we just can explain it in a different way. Maybe they just don't understand. And putting that pressure, I think, on yourself as a teacher, I think the students see that. And I think they respect that, and makes people just kind of want to work harder. They feel like we're all in it together. And
they see your investment in them.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, we care about it very, very much, but because it's not the only thing we do in music, I think that is a big part of it too. We want the kids teaching at a university, we can see firsthand what happens when the students come home and now they're in percussion ensemble and now they're in wind symphony and they're you know, they're representing, you know, what we do in the summer as well. Yeah. And in return, we're hopefully, you know, they come back stronger and they're in their programs doing better. They're talking to their friends see it and they want to be part of it. And, you know, it overall, like, it only just helps everything grow and get better. And I think that's just kind of been like definitely the result of just really focusing on that whole, again, just that education. Like they're all going to be teaching. They're all, you know, going to be hired as techs somewhere at some point. We want them to feel like they have the tools in their tool belt to, you know, give that information, you know. Yeah. I've never seen Paul give out like a push-up. I probably did push-ups I was like, oh, you missed that attack. I'm doing push-ups. I can't get you to do it. You know, like I put it on me. Like, I'll do that. You know, let's figure out how to crack the code. You know, and I think that, yeah, it's just always like a professional and like I don't know. It's a lot of fun.
I feel like you guys keep a lot of the human factor in it still. Mm-hmm. You know, because it's I think it's really easy just for people to get in front of groups and just kind of repeat these things that you hear.
Right.
You know, thinking like, okay, this is what's going to fix it, or this is what's going to fix it. And it's like, I think every situation is different because every line is different. Every group you have is different because it's different people or different.
Absolutely.
Different people. They're different a year later than they were last year, even if they're vets. It's just.
Absolutely, and you know, I think that's what's really cool. I think about our groups is that, you know, most of our students in like the drum corps side of it, most of them are college music majors.
Yeah.
And that I don't know that is like if that's in every group. I hope so. I think more and more kids, like I know again a lot of people just want to get out there and get that experience. You know, to put on the resume. I know that seems kind of silly, but at the same time, I think it's really important now, you know, just recognizing the value of that experience. But yeah, we often say the most important job, and I think if you ask Paul this question, he'll say the same thing when you interview him, but our most important job is to pick the right people for the group. Like again, everybody at some point is like, they all play really well. You know, we're splitting hairs at some point, but you really have to have that right fit personality-wise and make sure, you know, like we care so much about this that we want to make sure we're surrounding ourselves with the people that care about it as well. You know,
it's funny because I asked that exact question, like as far as like what you look for when you're bringing somebody on, to Jim Casella and to Osmore when he was with the Knights, and they said the same thing, like chemistry. It's
a big part of
you're
it.
living together, literally, and it's almost, I mean, you're marching next to somebody, you're standing next to somebody in the marimba line or the vibe line, you're literally attached by the hip. I mean,
and you think in the front ensemble, so much time is spent like just dealing with the logistics of the day, unloading, loading, like is, you know, everybody, I remember those first few years teaching where like, you know, the pit hasn't like eaten dinner the last 2 days and they won't get to shower before the show because of whatever reason, you know, like there's adversity kind of built in just to the activity, I think, especially in those earlier days that, you need to have the right people in there, the ones that can, and you know, in a lot of ways, it's funny because I think we lack so much adversity now that I kind of wish that we had, you know, like maybe the food truck will break down and they will have to like eat like tuna fish for 2 days.
Like what Paul was saying, that you guys got a chef.
It's crazy because you know what happens when you don't have adversity, then problems can arise. I know how my kids are. Like my kids want for nothing, but my God, you would think that they'd be able to just get along. It's like, you know, no, all of a sudden somebody's complaining to another one, and then it's a big fight before you know it. And I think that can happen, you know, within the sections as well. So it's always nice. Like Paul always jokes, like some of his experiences that he's had, you know, some of those early groups. You know, like a bus catching on fire on the way to the show. Like what a funny story. You know, the adversity at the time, it's not funny at all. And they're like all like having to overcome this together. But you know, 25 years later, it's really, really funny.
Yeah, so and like, it's something you don't forget clearly.
Right, those make the best stories, right? Yeah. The worst moments sometimes make the.
So I kind of joked about it last night when I said, you know, when you guys are arranging something and you want to make a change, if you, you know, in the middle of the night sneak into the file and change stuff, but like how. I mean, can you kind of just talk about how that happens? Because
well, typically, we communicate a lot. We live in the same house, obviously. So he usually right at the kitchen table or at the Starbucks down the road from our house. I definitely, the last 2 years, most of my writing happens there, even during the day. I found that and that's a new thing. That wasn't always like that, but just being away from home and just into like a place of captivity with some white noise. That's a good place. So yeah, from Babylon on, it's been at the Starbucks down the road from my house, which is awesome. That one opened right down the road from our house. Paul writes in our house, in the office, but yeah, it's tough with the kids. I mean, you know, we've had to that's been probably one of the hardest things is figure out how to make that work. As they get older, they get busier, and now that a lot of, you know, nobody drives yet, so it's like, okay, now, you know, we're the taxi drivers and trying to figure out how to balance that. No longer can I just be like, I'm staying up all night and I'm writing this opener. It's been many, many years since I've even thought that would be an option. So as far as changes, again, Paul, he has really great instincts, and it's funny, I tease him a lot, but yeah, it'll all work. It all coordinates, and there's no like big fighting. I will tease him about how totally inconsiderate he is sometimes with his use of rhythms, but in the big picture, it always works.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like my job. That's I think what I find so fun about arranging, and I don't know if it's like I really have always loved like puzzles and like crossword puzzles and like solving things like that. And I think in a lot of situations when we, again, like the source material for My Body is a Cage, and it's got 2 chords, and I'm thinking like, how are we going to do this? It's just like another puzzle. Like I've got to figure this out. I don't know what the solution is yet. I can't see it yet, but I know it's in there, and it's my job to figure it out. And I think I know you asked about source music, and if we spend a lot of time studying scores and all that, and there's that, but a lot of it is, as I've gotten older, I've become less married to the original. I think that, a lot of times, like when I was younger, and certainly when I would like try to play, transcriptions on, just as a marimba player, like, oh, I'm going to play this, and oh, the original is this, so we have to keep it the same. I think as I've gotten more comfortable seeing it as like the instruments we're playing on, oftentimes with, we're not even part of the discussion with some of the original music that we're playing. And so it's like my job to kind of make it appropriate for what we're playing, make it actually sound like it was maybe written for what we're playing, and then still toe the line of like, we've got the competitive activity part of it, like we're actually trying to score points, and then we have the musical appropriateness. And so I feel like if we can like get all of that done, that's the ultimate goal. And but I see a lot of it as like, it would be really easy in a lot of ways to just like, have everything just controlled by the electronic, or like this whole thing will just be, okay, it's only just going to be, somebody's going to trigger something, and then that's going to take care of like 2 minutes. And I just see it as like, we have such an opportunity as educators, as arrangers, because arrangers I think are educators too. We're teaching them by what they're having to play, and I think it's so easy to just not fill it in and not involve everybody. But I know when I was teaching public school and helping run a drum line, I didn't want that like freshman playing chimes to be the senior playing chimes.
Sure.
Like,
right. Yeah.
Like,
want them to learn and develop.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was like, but it was going to take it was up to me to make that happen. Like the kid doesn't know any better because he's 13, 14 years old, and he's going to do what's asked of him. So I just made sure that I just asked a lot of these kids. Okay, everybody's warming up on a keyboard, and okay, this is the way we're going to do this now. Because again, it's so easy to just, or the guys playing the auxiliary percussion, they won't learn how to do anything else unless I involve them with everything. And so even as an arranger, I just thought, you know what? I can't have the bell player just like sit there for 32 bars. I need to have them do something, and I can, through dynamics, through whatever, they have to play. You learn by doing it, and maybe that's not totally the way it will be once they're playing in an orchestra, and when you're like making $65 per triangle note because you play like once, maybe it's not going to be the same, but their experience is going to be a positive one. They'll likely want to stay with it, because now if we just really minimize the involvement of the kids and how much they play, then is that really a whole lot different than like those kids in the back of the band hall while the band's warming up and you see what I'm saying? It's basically the same experience that they're having when they're inside.
Right.
So again, I think just really trying to, I think it's funny, this last summer, we deliberately, like, there was one phrase right near the end of the show where the pit stops playing, and it's a 4-measure phrase, and that was in effect, like, let's just let the horns have this for these 4 bars. And at PASIC, when we did a run through with the battery, start to finish of the show, like, we get to that part, and it's just all of a sudden like, wow, the absence of sound. Like, you really notice it. Like, you hear the battery marking time, and that's all we heard. And it was like, wow. Because, like, even playing with the horns, like, there's always still stuff going on, but it was just like, wow.
I kind of relate that to, we had a jazz festival last weekend, and one of the clinicians was on stage talking about improvising, and he's like, don't be afraid to use space.
Yeah.
And so it's like that, like having a breath here and there. It's not
Right.
a bad thing.
Well, and that can be, that's an effect. And I think that it's not like all, 14 or 15 kids are playing constantly in the front ensemble.
Right.
But there's stuff
Yeah.
happening, and I think that it's the same thing in the battery. I think you see with our writing, like we are not afraid of having more than one thing going on at a time. I think as musicians, we should be expected to be able to hear and understand if we're hearing the primary or the secondary or the tertiary, and how we're balancing things, and that's on us. But it's also a great way to educate the kids. They understand from the bottom bass drummer through the cymbal line through anybody in the front ensemble. They all understand exactly where their role is at any given point in the show.
Well, and the thing that I think, and it's just my opinion, that I think you guys do the best, better than anyone else, is that they have their own line. And it's not just like, the vibes aren't playing the same rhythm 100% of the time as the marimbas.
Oh,
or they're
of course not.
You know what I mean? There's a bunch of counter melody and counter rhythm and secondary harmony. And there's all kinds of layers to it that I think you don't hear a lot of groups do anymore.
Right.
And it's even more obvious in batteries.
Sure.
It's like,
We're actually all playing together. That's the effect.
Yeah.
It's just that we're all playing at once.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's all unison.
Right.
Yeah, no, I totally get it, and I agree. That's not by accident. I mean, we really are trying to do that because I think we really try to, like, really just legitimize what it is that we're doing.
Right.
And
Yeah, one thing Dave and I we always tried to do with our groups, and obviously still now, is when the percussion played, we wanted them to be able to stand on their own.
yeah,
We wanted it to be musical without the winds.
Right.
That way when the winds come in, it's even more. It's
yes,
just, yeah.
it's an enhancement.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And so I think that's something that we enjoy, I think, especially when,
Well, because it's a challenge. I think you can't just write anything.
Right.
And yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. So let's have some fun questions.
Okay.
If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
That's a good question. I love soccer, and now all three of my kids play soccer. I say they have a choice, but I don't know that they really do in my heart. Maybe I would, oh man, I don't know. I like a lot of different things. I go through phases of things. I really like to build things. When I was a kid, I used to just do that kind of stuff all the time around our house. I would fix things, and you wouldn't always just call somebody to come and do it. So I always try to do that sort of thing first. Oh man, I don't know. Yeah, I'd either play soccer, which I'm pretty old to do that now. So I don't know. Maybe I'd be a professional fan. I'd love to coach. I really like doing that. I like the team sport aspect of what we do.
You're a coach now.
Yeah, exactly. And or there was really no other thing once I started really doing this. I didn't have a backup.
So I gotta ask.
Glad it worked out.
I gotta ask, when you go watch your kids play, do you? Is it on?
It's funny. I have a couple of different strategies to chill out. Sometimes I bring I'll bring the crossword puzzle, and I'll just sit and try to not pay attention totally. I've noticed that the younger the age group, because I have a 13-year-old, an 11-year-old, and then a 7-year-old, I definitely will. It's so tempting. I will end up yelling way more the younger the kid goes. It's like a library sometimes with my son's games. It's everybody's just kind of watching it happen.
Yeah.
But man, the younger it gets, everybody's just screaming. Paul will walk over and he's like, I don't understand how you can just remain so calm, as he's pacing and it's so funny. And that's actually been the greatest thing, is he did not play soccer. He's been we've assimilated him into our Borg of soccer. And but yeah, it gets a little intense sometimes, but it's fun. I mean, it's fun. That's just the greatest, is just to watch them play.
That's funny, because watching Paul a lot in front of the group, he's always pretty chill, for the most part. Yeah. But that environment would be fun to see.
What's that lack of, you don't have, how it is as a teacher, if you ever see him on the sideline, during the show, he always stands next to the mixing board. You cannot talk to him in any way. He goes on the left side. And it is so funny, because it's he is just, it's you've done all you can, and now it's up to the kids. Yeah. And it's kind of the same way. When we go to watch our kids play soccer, it's the same thing. You you know, you're powerless. And I think that's probably the hardest part about being a parent is how powerless we are in the big picture. It's like you just hope it all happens.
If I checked your Spotify or your Apple Music, what would be some of the artists recently played?
You know, that's kind of embarrassing. Let me think. We have Apple Music. We just got it, actually. I will say I went through a really long time where I didn't really listen to a lot of music, and because it was all just work related. That would be when I'd listen to music, and so I listened to a lot of talk radio, NPR.
Cool.
I like hearing grown-ups talk to each other.
Yeah,
I think because I
podcast.
don't get a lot of that.
Yeah.
So I really loved the Malcolm Gladwell Revisionist History podcast. I went through a phase where I was running a lot, and that was my jam. No music, it was just listening to those. My kids, they definitely try to turn us on to like what they like, and it's usually horrifying, like just terrible. But I will usually counteract that with like, okay, let's give you an education on your way to school now. And so like my son just started jazz band, and the director's really into like funk and Tower Power, all that kind of stuff. And so we played like you know, Chameleon, Herbie Hancock, the Headhunters album, you know, and just talking to him about like, you know, the music you listen to is all recorded this way. Like they can be anywhere in the world and record their track. And I was like, this is back when like the musicians were all in like one place, and it's all about the collaboration and just kind of really trying to. I appreciate that, I think, about music. But I like a lot of different things. It just kind of ebbs and flows. Sometimes I just turn on Apple Music and just go to like whatever the new music is, and I just let it happen.
I think the thing I appreciate most about, like I'm a huge Beatles fan.
Okay.
And the thing I appreciated about them the most was that they had to run the tape, and everybody had to do their job the whole time.
It's amazing, isn't it?
There was no going back and
Yeah.
like, let me just fix this one thing, or.
Yeah, you couldn't. Yeah, there's no auto tune, and we're not fixing
Human
that one
factor.
note.
More human factor.
Exactly. I think that's why people still go to concerts, because it's like you see there's that edge and that uncertainty about it.
Yeah, and then the bands that play really well live, you're like, man, like, yeah, you appreciate it more. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Favorite movie?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Saving Private Ryan is one of those where I think we watch it every time it's on. I love Miracle, the hockey movie.
Yeah.
I would cry every time I remember still even seeing the preview in the movie theater, like when it was a trailer. It wasn't even out yet, and I would like cry during the trailer. I love it. I love those kind of like sports movies. Rudy, you know, all those kind of like.
The best line in Miracle is like, I'm not looking for the best players, I'm looking for the right ones.
Absolutely, when they're doing the sprints at the end, and then the guy he says his name. I play for the United States of America.
Yeah.
I was like, God.
Finally, somebody gets it.
I was like, oh, I'm gonna cry. Yeah, I got goosebumps. Yeah, I love that. Those things. I see a lot of Disney movies.
I'm not quite there yet, but
Yeah, you're good.
everybody
You
says
got
it's
some
coming.
time. It's
Everybody
coming.
says it's coming.
But I like them. I appreciate that. You know, Inside Out. I think Paul and I actually went and saw Inside Out without our kids before we saw it with them, and we were like both like just crying during the whole time, because it's about your kid growing up, and it's like, God, you know, no joke.
All right, last one. If you were jumping on a plane right now and going on vacation.
Oh, it's easy. Aspen. We just got back from ski. We ski every year, like no question about it. We made a pact like 20 some years ago. No matter where we are in life, we are going to ski every year, no matter what. And so we do it. Now our kids are great skiers, and that's just like my youngest. She knows that we do a snow hotel vacation and a no snow hotel vacation every year. So I bring them out to California in the summer with the drum corps. But yeah, every winter we've gone skiing. Except for the years that I've actually had a child during that time. We have two with winter birthdays. But beyond that, every single year of those 20 some years we've gone skiing, and it's the best.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for doing
Absolutely.
this. I appreciate it so much. It was
My
great.
pleasure.
All right.
Absolutely my pleasure.